Has added his voice to the debate. Raila is asking the government to put aside its laptop deal project that the Jubilee government, of course, had formulated and use those monies to pay teachers' salaries instead. He says the government has its priorities wrong and should consider the plight of teachers. Well, also tonight, another battle over money is indeed looming, with the Mau Mau War veterans sending a tough message to the Law Society of Kenya to leave them alone and their millions as well. Well, the LSK is accused of mischief by the veterans over their sudden interest in their case and compensation. They say LSK never helped them in their years of legal drama and should now keep off. Well, elsewhere, Kenya's Shujaa side had mixed fortunes in the Rugby World Cup, finishing in 4th place after losing to England and Fiji. Coach Mike Friday said the stormy weather conditions disoriented the team, which put forward one of their best performances this season. We'll take a closer look at their performance a little later in this bulletin. And of course, later I'll be telling you about US President Barack Obama's trip to Africa and why his statement on gay rights a couple of days ago is receiving criticism here in Kenya. Well, that and more, including our weekly political segment Checkpoint, is coming up. Let's first take a look at our top stories tonight.
In 1997 waliongea na rais mstaafu Moi. Sina hiyo? 2002 wakaongea na rais mstaafu Kibaki. Sasa mbona hawataki kuongea na Uhuru Kenyatta?
Teachers' strike enters week 2 with no deal in sight. Keep off our compensation, Mau Mau War veterans tell Law Society. South Africa's witch doctors make their prediction about Mandela.
And there's men over for Collins and Jira. And Jira just puts down the hammer and goes for the line.
And in sports, Kenya registers mixed fortunes in Rugby 7's World Cup in Moscow. Thank you for joining us. Former Prime Minister Raila Odinga wants the government to suspend the multi-billion shilling laptop project and instead channel the funds towards the payment of teachers' salaries. Raila says the government's priorities are misplaced and wants the teachers' demands treated as a priority. Well, he spoke in Mombasa as the Secretary to the Cabinet, Francis Kimemia, asked teachers to return to work and give dialogue a chance. The Mau Mau Veterans Association has asked the Law Society to keep away from their compensation. We'll come to that story a little later. Let's first take a look at what Raila had to say over the teachers' drama.
Come Monday, the teachers' strike called by the Kenya National Union of Teachers will enter its 2nd week as the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Teachers marks the 3rd week since teachers under its umbrella abandoned classrooms. The government has threatened to withhold June's salaries for striking teachers, but it appears the teachers' unions are just warming up for confrontation with the government.
And the strike is now entering the cruelest stage of it.
The real strike commences on Monday, 1st of July.
As the teachers maintain a hardline stance, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga is turning the heat on the government over the crisis in the education sector as the government prepares to implement the laptop project.
It is basically somebody who is trying to implement something upside down, climbing the tree from the top and then from down. That money should be actually diverted and paid to teachers as salaries.
Raila's former deputy Musalia Mudavadi has broken his silence, wading into the teachers' strike. Speaking during the burial of former National Bank Managing Director Reuben Marambi, Mudavadi says the standoff in the education sector is a national emergency and it is not enough for the president to call for dialogue about it. He wants the president to take personal charge to bring normalcy to the sector. The government is inviting teachers to the negotiating table.
Tuko tayari kwa dialogue kuongea na watu ya TSC, tuone watu ya KNUT, tuongee vile tunaweza kusuluhisha hilo jambo.
1997 waliongea na rais mstaafu Moi. Sina hiyo? 2002 wakaongea na rais mstaafu Kibaki. Sasa mbona hawataki kuongea na Uhuru Kenyatta?
NAT, which is demanding the implementation of the 1997 deal on house, commuter and medical allowances, has ruled out any negotiations on the collective bargaining agreement. KUPPET, which is demanding harmonization of leave, commuter and responsibility allowances, is now singing the same tune.
We are not going to negotiate because the figures are known, the number of teachers are known. What we are only saying is that when they call us, we shall go there to receive the figures.
The industrial court is on Monday expected to give a verdict on whether or not the teachers' strike is legal. Rita Tinina, KTN.
Well, Richard Kibagendi is the Assistant National Treasurer at the Kenya National Union of Teachers, and he joins us now. Thank you for coming in. The government has declared the 97 deal null and void. What is the way forward for teachers in demanding their pay rights?
Thank you. I don't think the government is right to say the deal is null and void because it's something which was signed. We have the minutes to that effect. It was gazetted, and nobody has the powers to remove it from being effected, because if it has to be changed, it is then by the same committee, which is that of the Teachers Remuneration Committee at that time.
But we are, of course, in a new constitutional dispensation, and the Salaries and Remunerations Commission actually issued a notice to various unions, including yourself, saying that all collective bargaining agreements come June 30th today will be null and void if they had not been implemented by that date.
That's why we are saying by today, 30th, that deal is supposed to be implemented in full. If it's not, because we had issued a notice of strike, then that means we proceeded with our strike because we did it before 30th, which is today.
How do you intend to get to the negotiating table? In the clip that we've just seen, the Deputy President is asking why teachers are unwilling to sit and negotiate with the Jubilee government.
We are not saying we cannot sit with the government, but what is there is the time that was for negotiation ended. What we have now is a deal which is sealed. And
which SRC has said is no longer relevant, is now null and void.
When we went to Parliament, Parliamentary Committee on Delegated Legislation, they said it is still valid. Valid because it has not had minutes to remove it. Nobody can negotiate what has come from negotiations and negotiated by minister. Parliament
failed just this past week to amend a piece of the budget law to relocate funds from the laptop project to yourselves. What confidence do you have that sticking with Parliament you will see any real wins in your fight for salaries?
For now, we are not depending on government, on Parliament. What we are saying is this deal which is sealed now, we've gone before a conciliator in the Ministry of Labour. We've been given a certificate of disagreement. Certificate of disagreement means we therefore can proceed on a protected strike, and that is the strike we're in now.
Well, for the sake of the children who, of course, are missing out so much in school, we certainly hope this matter is resolved soon. I thank you, Richard Kibagendi, for coming to speak to us from the Kenya National Union of Teachers. Let's move on to another row that is, again, about money. The Mau Mau Veterans Association has asked the Law Society of Kenya to stop interfering with the ongoing process of compensating the war veterans. Addressing a news conference this morning, the Association Secretary General Gitu Kaengeri said it is surprising to see the LSK purporting to have interests of Mau Mau war veterans at heart, yet it had not supported them in their long struggle for compensation.
3 weeks after the British government accepted to compensate the Mau Mau war veterans for torture and inhuman treatment meted on them during the colonial period, the push and pull between the Mau Mau War Veterans Association and the Law Society of Kenya continues to stretch even further. Last week, LSK officials resolved to conduct an audit of former Mau Mau freedom fighters over the 2.6 billion shillings the British government will compensate them. LSK officials said that the audit and identity verification would prevent fraud. However, this move has been sharply criticized by the Mau Mau War Veterans Society, who say LSK should keep off the veterans' compensation.
Tunaona mtua amepotoka kwa sababu anazungumuza mambo ambayo hahusiki nayo. Sisi hatukwenda kwa Mutua hata siku moja kuuliza yeye kuja wakilisha sisi katika koti kwa kesi yetu ya dhuluma. Sisi tulitafuta njia yetu nyingine na tukaenda nayo na mpaka tukashinda.
But even as the 5,228 veterans wait for the actualization of their compensation payments, many more senior Kenyans who claim to have fought in the same war continue to emerge. 83-year-old Samuel Gishuhi is one such Kenyan. He claims he has lived over 50 years with a bullet lodged in his body since the Mau Mau War in 1952. He is, however, not a beneficiary of the historical compensation.
Nilikuwa nahusiana na chakula. Ng'ombe namna hii chakula. Sasa nilikuwa kama mkubwa ya chakula.
Gishuhi says that the reason he missed out on being in the successful group was because he failed to raise 1,500 shillings for registration. However, these words may seem like a ray of light for him and many others who believe they should have been compensated.
Orodha hiyo si ya mwisho, kwa sababu tunafikiria watu wengine ambao tulikuwa nao pia wanataka kuweka kesi yao huko Uingereza. Na ikiwa wanaweza kulipiwa zaidi yetu, tunashukuru sana.
The payout followed an out-of-court settlement between the war veterans and the British government in a case that dragged in the British courts since 2009. Betty Kyalo, KTN Sunday Night.
The top three leaders of the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy have called on governors and senators in the country to protect the ideals and the principles of devolution against what they have called attempts to hinder the decentralization of power. Now, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, and Senate Minority Leader Moses Wetangula at the same time asked court governors and senators to agitate for implementation of devolution projects instead of waiting for things to be handed piecemeal from the central government. They were speaking during the opening of the court retreat for governors and senators in Mombasa.
And we are not going to set the agenda of this country by reacting to situations. We must be proactive. We must lead. We must set the agenda.
We will do whatever it takes, and I mean it, to make sure that we support you, governors and senators, to make sure that the dream of true, meaningful devolution is achieved. And I think that is a challenge. That is a challenge. Because you know it, as you know it, if this works out, hata shida za Republican Council na zinginezo atapotea, because these are products of marginalization.
I want to repeat, we must get our priorities right. Otherwise, we play into the hands of the forces of status quo that are looking for every excuse to kill devolution.
The news that Kenya had qualified to the Rugby World Cup semi-finals in Russia was a delight to many Kenyans, including President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was among those who took to Twitter to congratulate the Kenyan boys. And although Kenya lost to England in the semi-finals, the boys clearly made a bold statement.
Here in the Luzhniki Stadium.
The social media was abuzz as Kenyans expressed their joy after the national sevens team qualified for the Rugby World Cup semi-finals. President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta was among those who posted positive remarks on the team's exploits, among other leaders. Kenya's match against England was late for close to an hour due to heavy downpour in Moscow. The weather conditions did not work for Kenya as they suffered a 12-5 defeat, with Andrew Omondi scoring Kenya's only try while Dan Norton touched down twice for England.
It's a lottery, that's the rubber to green, that's rugby. Two teams going hammer and tong, and we just come out the wrong side of it, really. And, you know, we stuck in there. We've come a long way this season. We've shown that with limited resources that we can compete with the big boys.
Pitch ball from Uma. Uma with a slip of the ball.
Earlier in the day, Kenya beat France 24-19 to qualify for the semis, courtesy of William Barker's sudden death try in a tense quarter-final at the Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow.
Squares the scores out wide with a try of his own, and Kenya very much back in this tie. Puts down the hammer and goes goes for the line. That is sheer pace and sheer brilliance from the Kenyan speedster.
The boys not only scored but also had a jig on the pitch. In 2009, Kenya also bowed out in the semi-finals in Dubai against Argentina. Victor Ogale, KTN Sports.
So moment, he put his dancing shoes.
Well, U.S. President Barack Obama today visited Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 18 of his 27 years in jail. It was the second time Obama was visiting the cell. The first time was in 2006 when he was a U.S. senator. Now, the visit, a tribute to the ailing anti-apartheid hero, came hours before Obama delivered a speech at the University of Cape Town. His speech echoed the Day of Affirmation address that was given at the same venue by Robert Kennedy in 1966. Obama will conclude his South African tour tomorrow and head to Tanzania. He is expected to arrive at Dar es Salaam's Julius Nyerere International Airport in the afternoon aboard Air Force One. Here at home, Deputy President William Ruto says the United States President's decision to skip Kenya will not affect bilateral relations between Kenya and the U.S. Ruto was speaking at St. Gabriel Catholic Church in Nakuru.
Nchi zingine tunaheshimu msimamo wao na tunataka pia waheshimu msimamo wa watu wa Kenya. Na sisi kama watu wa Kenya tunasema this country, the nation of Kenya, is a God-fearing nation.
Well, South Africa and Africa at large continues to pray for Nelson Mandela, who was admitted at a Pretoria hospital 22 days ago with an acute lung infection. KTN's Asha Mwilu now joins us from South Africa with the latest update on the health of the anti-apartheid hero.
On Sunday here in South Africa, no update was given on the progress of the health of the ailing icon Nelson Mandela. At the Mediclinic Heart Hospital in Pretoria, the crowds outside grew smaller. We understand that across South Africa, the Sunday service in most churches was dedicated to holding prayers for the ailing Nelson Mandela and of course, his family. South Africans showing their solidarity up until now, day 25, when Mandela has been suffering from an acute lung infection. The U.S. President Barack Obama, who is visiting South Africa as his second pit stop of his African trip, went down to Cape Town and he visited Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was held for 18 years. We understand that Obama, who was accompanied by his wife, the U.S. First Lady Michelle Obama, said that he was humbled. The experience was really humbling for him to be where Mandela was jailed for 18 years. Well, the KTN crew down here in South Africa wanted to give you a different angle to this whole story. We've heard it from the doctors and the family members, South Africans at large, giving us what their views are on the health of Nelson Mandela. Well, we visited a traditional healer who also had a stake in the say of what happens with Mandela, and we visited one of them in Soweto, where of course Mandela lived most of his years during his struggle for anti-apartheid. And we visited a Sangoma. As you well know them, they predict the future or consult ancestors on various matters. Really interesting story. Take a watch. In the heart of Soweto in Johannesburg, we arrive for an important traditional ritual. A local traditional healer, or famously known as Tsangoma, has invited us to witness the event. Widely known and respected across South Africa, the Tsangoma have since time immemorial reportedly consulted the ancestors to get predictions on the country's most important events. Today, the Tsangoma consults the ancestors on Nelson Mandela's health.
You don't just be a Sangoma. Not everybody becomes a Sangoma. Yes, this is a calling from ancestors, your ancestors. They are just giving you that wisdom to predict.
Once the Sangomas get the attention of the ancestors, they begin consulting on the fate of former statesman Mandela.
We're predicting whatever that is happening in the country with Madiba, the health. all of that. Through the poems, we get the answers. Right now, his ancestors, they are protecting him in all the way. Yes, that's why he's still in that condition, but he's going to be better. He's going to leave. When the smoke comes up, then we communicate. Then we clap the hands like this. That is called communication with the ancestors. You are asking for the permission for whatever you are asking for. They just said it's going to be okay with Matiba. They are protecting him right now. They are with him. His ancestors from father's side, from mother's side. So right now it's between the people who are living here in South Africa and other countries. Just pray, have faith in Matiba's life.
Yes, you know, he's made an effort.
The Tsangomas say such rituals are currently being performed across South Africa, all in the hope that the ancestors can hear the nation's prayer and grant South Africans more time with their anti-apartheid icon. Asha Mwilu, KTN, Johannesburg.
And thank you, Asha, for that. We'll be taking a short break right now. And of course, a little later in this bulletin checkpoint, we will be discussing Nelson Mandela and leadership in Africa. So don't go too far. And welcome back to KTN Sunday Night. President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto have waded into the gay rights debate triggered last Friday when U.S. President Barack Obama spoke about it in Senegal. While Uhuru and Ruto, though speaking at separate religious events today, both insisted that Kenya is a God-fearing nation and will uphold religious values. KTN's Noah Tieno with that report.
The gay debate has taken an interesting twist as Kenyan leaders continue to react to what they have interpreted as U.S. President Barack Obama's position on the rights of gays. Deputy President William Ruto was in a Nakuru church on Sunday, a day that most Kenyans have reserved for church services, and he told the congregation exactly what he thought about the position of the U.S. President.
Those who believe in other things, that is their business. We believe in God. Ama watu wa Nakuru mnasema nini? Sisi ni watu, taifa hii ni taifa ambalo linamcha Mungu. Hatuamini yale mambo mengine watu wengine wanatembeza humuhumu. Sisi tunaamini maneno ya Mungu, tunaamini katika mila na desturi ya Afrika, na tunaamini katika maneno ya Mungu.
This is what President Obama said at a joint press conference with Senegalese President Macky Sall on Friday, as Obama began his tour of Africa.
When it comes to people's personal views and their religious faith, etc., I think we have to respect the diversity of views that are there. But when it comes to how the state treats people, how the law treats people, I believe that everybody has to be treated equally. I don't believe in discrimination of any sort.
The statement, however, drew immediate suspicion as to what exactly Obama was prescribing for African countries.
This country, the nation of Kenya, is a God-fearing nation. We believe in God.
Sisi tunaamini taifa ambalo linamnyenyekea na kuogopa Mwenyezi Mungu, hakuna lolote ambalo.
Now, Tino KTN, Sunday Night Live.